Welcome to the Start Strong Calculator webinar. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land where we're recording today. I'd like to also show my respects to the elders past and present. I acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and this region. This presentation follows on from the Early Childhood Education Roadshow held across New South Wales in September 2018, and also a webinar on the implementation of Start Strong 3-year-old non-equity funding delivered by CCSA and CELA in October. During this webinar, we will be discussing on how to utilise the New South Wales Department of Education's Start Strong funding calculator to project Start Strong funding amounts for 2019, including payments related to the extension of funding to 3-year-old non-equity children. This webinar will cover a range of issues related to the effective use of the calculator, including each point you can see on the slide. The Department of Education's Start Strong funding calculator can be accessed at this address. We recommend that you bookmark that address. However, the page can also be found with a quick Google search. Be aware that other search engines such as Bing might present their results in a different order. Once on the web page, the Start Strong funding calculator can be downloaded onto your PC by clicking on the link. The calculator will open in Excel workbook. Ensure that the version you have downloaded is version 4, the current version as of the 17th of January 2019, particularly if you're using a saved copy of the workbook that you've previously downloaded. You can also check that you've got the right version by selecting your CIFA band on tab 2 of the calculator and confirming that the dollar values are given for both 2018 and 2019 as shown. The different dollar values reflect that version 4 includes a 2% increase in Start Strong funding rates that commenced on the 1st of January 2019. Depending on your version and security settings for Windows and Excel, you may also need to click on the Enable Editing button before you'll be able to use the calculator. After opening the Excel workbook, the calculator can be accessed by selecting the tab labelled 2, Calculator. The Start Strong funding calculator should be used in conjunction with the funding guidelines, which includes critical information such as child and service eligibility criteria, spending rules, priority of access rules, service safety net, and calculation of funding. Again, if you haven't already bookmarked that web page, it can be found with a simple Google search. Be careful to select the indicated link. The link above it titled Start Strong Program Guidelines takes you to an earlier version that does not include 3-year-old non-equity funding. Also, again, be aware that other search engines such as Bing might present their results in a different order. More information on the key elements of the Start Strong Guidelines was provided during the previous CCSA and CELA Start Strong 3-year-old non-equity funding webinar, which can still be accessed at either the CELA or CCSA website. The Early Childhood Contract Management System, ECMS, is the online system used by the Department of Education to manage funding and contracting arrangements with early childhood service providers, including Start Strong funding. Services are able to use ECMS to confirm future payment amounts. Start Strong funding amounts for 2019, commencing with the December 2018 payment, are now available. We recommend that you schedule regular checks of ECMS to ensure that all activities such as acceptance of terms and conditions or submissions of acquittals are up to date. Failure to attend to these tasks may affect the timely receipt of future payments. ECMS is accessed using an AusKey, an online authentication service utilised by all Australian governments to provide secure access to online services. A registration key from the Department of Education is also required to enable first-time access to ECMS. We recommend that services ensure that at least 2 administrator AusKeys are maintained for different staff on different computers within the service to ensure redundancy in the event of staff changes or computer failure. Data to be entered into the calculator is drawn from 2 separate sources. The first is the data submitted as part of the August 2018 annual preschool census. This data is used to calculate calculate the 2018-19 Start Strong funding for equity children and those in the year before school. Ensure that you select the correct bracket for children who are enrolled in exact hours. For example, if a child attends for 240 hours per year exactly, record them in the first box of less than or equal to 240 hours. This breakdown is necessary to adjust for children with a disability and additional needs being eligible for the full rate of equity funding if they are enrolled for at least 300 hours per annum and have an individual learning plan that charts a course to a full 600 hours enrolment period prior to commencing school. Ensure that children with a disability or additional needs that are enrolled for exactly 300 hours per year are entered into the second box. The second source of data for entry into the calculator is an ad hoc census to be conducted in March 2019. This will only determine the funding for 3-year-old non-equity children, which commences from 1st of January 2019. Equity funding and year before school funding have already been determined based on the August 2018 preschool census. We will now take a detailed look on how to enter data into the calculator. Section A is where you enter the base rate funding data for your service, the funding band, and the regional loading or ARIA band. The funding band determines the base rate of funding for your non-equity children, while the regional loading band determines whether additional amounts are payable to assist with higher costs of operating a preschool in a more remote location. Information about funding band and regional loading is entered by using the drop-down boxes and selecting the appropriate information for your service. Your CEFA band and ARIA band can be found on previous funding letters from the Department of Education or in ECMS. The calculator will not provide results unless both question 1 and question 2 have been completed. Section B is where you can enter enrolment hours data for your service. The number in each box can be entered directly or selected from the drop-down box. The calculator will not provide results unless all boxes in Section B have values entered, so include 0 as the value for any empty box. The numbers for completing questions 3, 4 and 5 of Section B are derived from your August 2018 annual preschool census. The information to respond to question 6 will come from the data that you will be reporting on in the March 2019 ad hoc census. The information for question 7 requires you to add together the total number of children requiring English language assistance from the August 2018 census for all equity children and for 4-year-old non-equity children, and from the March 2019 ad hoc census for 3-year-old non-equity children only. The number of 3-year-old non-equity children reported in the March 2019 ad hoc census as requiring English language assistance, which was included in the total at question 7, is also reported separately at question 8. Equity children are broken into 2 groups, those with a disability and additional needs, and those without. If a child qualifies as an equity child on multiple grounds, including disability, and they are also low income or from an Aboriginal background or both, only include them in question 4. Do not also include them in question 3. Note that question 4 and question 3 don't appear in sequential order. The order is actually question 4, question 3, question 5 reading down the first column, so be careful to read the definition before completing each line. Also remember that for children with a disability only, you need to separately break down the number of children enrolled for greater than 240 hours and fewer than 300 hours, and the number enrolled for at least 300 hours and fewer than 320 hours. If all other data indicates that a service might possibly be eligible for service safety net funding, an additional Section E will become available. Completing that information will determine if an additional safety net amount is available to raise the service's annual Start Strong funding to $132,000. This amount increased to $134,640 from the 1st of January 2019. Due to this change, safety net funding for the 2018-19 funding year will be $133,320. Enter the data directly or by selecting from the drop-down boxes.
At this point, all data has been entered into the calculator. If results are not being shown, the most likely cause is that a box doesn't have a value entered. The estimated funding resulting from hours of enrolment is shown in Section C. This does not reflect loadings that are independent of hours of enrolment, such as regional loading and English language loading. All dollar amounts in Section C and elsewhere in the calculator represent GST exclusive amounts. If the service is registered for GST, as most services are, 10% GST will be added onto the payment, which must then be declared in the service's business activity statement covering the date of payment. The breakdown of the total amount for each enrolment hours category is also shown. Base rate funding applies to each child included in Section B, questions 3 through to 5, whether they are equity children or not. Equity funding refers to the additional amount that each eligible enrolled child generates based on the difference between the maximum Start Strong base rate per child and the base rate applicable to the CEFA band that the service is located in. Note that if a service is located in CEFA bands 1 through 8, their base rate is already set at the maximum rate, so no additional funding is provided beyond base rate, and the equity funding amount is shown in the calculator as 0. Note that from 1 January 2019 onwards, the maximum rate has increased to $6,732 per child. Prior to 1 January 2019, it was $6,600 per child. Equity funding disability refers to a further amount beyond the general level of equity funding that is paid for children with disability and additional needs. This is due to equity funding equivalent to the maximum base rate being provided to these children with a minimum of 300 hours enrolment, subject to their individual learning plan demonstrating a pathway to 600 hours enrolment prior to commencing school. The note below the table in red font is important to remember. 3-year-old non-equity children are only eligible for funding from January 2019, from which time they will be funded at 25% of the relevant CEFA band base rate funding amount. While all other figures in Section C are 12-month figures, the amounts for 3-year-old non-equity children are for 6 months only. The first payment for 3-year-old non-equity children will be made as a separate payment in June 2019 to cover the period from January to June 2019 inclusive. From July 2019 onwards, payment for 3-year-old non-equity children will be included with your quarterly Start Strong payments. For non-safety net services, the total funding, including loadings, is displayed in Section D. Again, the dollar amounts in Section D represent GST exclusive amounts. The bottom half of Section D shows the funding that is attributable only to the August 2018 annual preschool census. That is, there is no inclusion of 3-year-old non-equity children in the calculation. This part of Section D can be used to estimate the Start Strong funding amounts to be received in December 2018 and April 2019. The breakdown of the total amount is also shown. Similar to Section C, base rate funding is calculated for each child based on their hours of enrolment and the CEFA band base rate. Equity funding represents additional funding for eligible children based on the difference between the maximum Start Strong base rate and the CEFA band base rate. No additional equity funding will be shown if the CEFA band base rate is already at the maximum rate, that is, CEFA bands 1 through to 8. Equity funding disability represents additional funding above standard equity funding for children based on the maximum base rate applying from a 300-hour enrolment. If all equity children with disability and additional needs are enrolled for 600 hours or more, the equity funding disability amount will be 0, since the maximum rate already applies as the equity rate. The top half of Section D shows the funding that is attributable both to the August 2018 annual preschool census and to the March 2019 ad hoc census. That is, 3-year-old non-equity children enrolled in 2019 are now included in the calculation. This part of Section D can be used to estimate the Start Strong funding amounts to be received in July 2019 and October 2019, as well as the one-off payment to be received in June 2019. Again, there is a breakdown of the total funding amount with the same definitions applying to what is base rate, equity, and equity disability funding. For safety net services, the total funding including loadings is displayed in Section F after Section E has been completed. Again, there is a breakdown of the total funding amount with the same definitions applying to what is base rate, equity, and equity disability funding. Similar to Section D for other services, the bottom half of Section F shows the funding amount attributable only to the August 2018 annual preschool census. That is, there is no inclusion of 3-year-old non-equity children in the calculation. This part of Section F can be used to estimate the Start Strong funding amounts to be received in December 2018 and April 2019 by Safety Net Services. The top half of Section F shows the funding that is attributable both to the August 2018 annual preschool census and to the March 2019 ad hoc census. That is, 3-year-old non-equity children enrolled in 2019 are now included in the calculation. This part of Section F can be used to estimate the Start Strong funding amounts to be received by Safety Net Services in July 2019 and October 2019, as well as the one-off payment to be received in June 2019. If both tables show total amounts of $133,320, no additional payment will be made in June 2019, as the safety net amount for 2018-19 already exceeds the amount that would otherwise be payable. Now let's look at how the calculator results can be used to estimate payment amounts. The information in Table D, or Table F for a safety net service, can be used to estimate the Start Strong payment amounts to be received over the next 12 months. However, due to the operation of the wash-up that occurs in December each year, it is necessary to also know the amount of Start Strong funding that was received in the October 2018 payment. To ensure that the correct October 2018 amount is used, log into ECMS to confirm the amount. That should ensure that the amount isn't confused with other payments that may have been made at a similar time, such as Disability Inclusion Program funding. If you're using your bank statement, for example, you don't have immediate access to ECMS, remember to remove GST from the paid amount by dividing by 1.1. The first two payments for December 2018 and April 2019 can be determined by using the total amount from the bottom table of Section D or from Section F if it's a safety net service. The method is to take the total amount from the bottom table of Section D or Section F for a safety net service, subtract 2 times the October 2018 payment, and then divide the resulting amount by 2, which will give you the value of the December 2018 and April 2019 payments. So looking at our example, the total amount in the bottom table of Section D was $249,510, and if we take it that this service was actually paid $60,000 in the October 2018 payment, we would subtract $120,000 from that, leaving a figure of $129,510. Dividing that by 2 gives us payments of $64,755 in each of December 2018 and April 2019. The next amount that can be estimated is the June 2019 payment, which is the one-off payment to cover the enrolment of 3-year-old non-equity children for the period January to June 2019. To calculate this amount, we will need to use the total amounts from both tables of Section D or of Section F for a safety net service. To calculate this amount, we simply subtract the estimated annual funding pre-2019 from the estimated funding amount for the whole of 2018-19. So in our example, the estimated funding amount for financial year 2018-19 was $263,016. We would subtract from that the estimated annual funding pre-2019 of $249,510, leaving us with $13,506 to be the amount to be paid in June 2019. The final payment amounts that can be calculated using the calculator are the July 2019 and October 2019 payments. To make these calculations, we'll need the total amount from the top table of Section D or Section F for a safety net service. To calculate these amounts, we simply take the total amount from the top table of Section D or Section F for a safety net service and divide that number by 4. So in our example, the total amount from the top table of Section D was $263,016. Dividing that by 4 gives us an amount of $65,754 for each of the July 2019 and October 2019 payments. So looking at the full payments to this service across the next 12 months, recalling that they had already received $60,000 in October 2018 from the previous year's funding, they should have received $64,755 in December and can expect to receive that same amount in April 2019. They can expect a one-off payment for 3-year-old non-equity children in June 2019 of $13,506, and then ongoing payments in July and October of 2019 of $65,754. You can also see what the values are if the 10% GST is then added on. That's the amount you would expect to see going into your bank account. Finally, let's look at the 50% fee pass-through requirement for additional funding of 3-year-old non-equity children under Start Strong. As the June 2019 payment represents 50%, or 6 months, of the total amount of additional funding that is going to be received by the service due to enrolment of 3-year-old non-equity children for the year, it also represents the amount that total fees need to be reduced by in 2019. Let's have a quick reminder of the fee pass-through rules. Where services have a higher fee for non-equity 3-year-old children than non-equity children in the year before school, it will be expected that the fee reduction first be applied to lowering fees for non-equity 3-year-old children. However, fees for non-equity 3-year-olds should not be lower than non-equity children in the year before school. If fees for non-equity 3-year-old children and non-equity children in the year before school are already the same, it will be expected that the fee reduction be applied to lowering the fees of all children. This includes ensuring that equity fees for all children remain below non-equity fees, and again that fees for non-equity 3-year-olds not be lower than fees for children in the year before school. If you require further support understanding 3-year-old non-equity funding, including the use of the funding calculator, you can contact Community Early Learning Australia, CELA, or Community Connection Solutions Australia, CCSA, on the telephone numbers and email addresses shown. Thank you very much for attending this webinar.